We are very flexible here, Jack. We can do whatever works for you. So I'm just glad that you were finally able to connect and join us this evening, because we have lots of guests who are just so excited to hear what you have to share with us this evening. So, as I mentioned to you all earlier, Jack is joining us tonight to talk about his experiences over the last 22 years and his book, Like a River to the Sea. But before we get started with tonight's program, I want to personally thank Jack for his continued support of the Friends educational initiatives. Jack has not only personally given to the education initiatives, but he has also been an active fundraiser for the Friends in both our virtual and our in-person education. So Jack, we're very grateful and appreciative of your support. Thank you.
Oh, you're very welcome.
Yeah, and with that, I'd like to welcome you to this evening's programming. And why don't we start with having you tell us, who was Lauren?
Well, thank you for having me, Donna, and I appreciate everybody's patience with the technical difficulties. I hope everyone can hear, and I'm sorry that you can't see. Donna, it's very nice to be here with you, but I'd like to also thank you, Courtney, and the countless other friends of Flight 93 on behalf of all the family members of our 40 heroes. The work you do to share with generations the history of 40 remarkable souls is greatly appreciated, and just a tremendously heartfelt thank you from us.
Thank you.
I'll start off with telling you a little bit about Lauren. She was born in Bloomington, Indiana, the middle of three girls. Her father was a college and professional football coach, so they moved around quite a bit. Being a coach's daughter, Lauren grew up around a lot of male testosterone. And although she was petite and beautiful, she was pound for pound as strong as any guy I ever met, and mentally more so. She was tough. And there's a lot of funny stories in the book about her as a child growing up. One in particular, when she was only 4 years old, she was asked what she wanted Santa to bring her for Christmas. And her answer was, my own bottle of ketchup. So that gives you a sense of who she was as a child, but you'll learn more about what an incredible, selfless and loving individual Lauren was too, because she had a zest for life. She had the love of babies and a unique ability to make people laugh, even at her own expense. To Lauren, life was a party, but it wasn't a party unless you laughed and you danced. And she had a self-deprecating way about her that would get you to do both, inspiring you to reach out beyond your comfort zone, if you will. And she was the best friend any woman would ever have. In fact, Lauren had a contract to write a book, a self-help book for women to inspire them to do more with their lives and gain courage and self-confidence. She died before she got to finish it, and her sisters and mother took on the project and finished it to fruition. The book's called You Can Do It, and it's meant to inspire women to reach out and go beyond what they normally think they can do. And by doing that, you gain a lot of appreciation and self-confidence and respect for yourself. And she found that in her own life and wanted to share that. I was a kid from Indiana, and my success at golf, junior golf, took me to the University of Texas, where I would meet Lauren. I remember how beautiful her eyes were when I first met her, but it would take a couple of years before we ever went out. And our first date was a U2 concert in 1985. After I graduated, I moved to San Francisco Bay Area for work, and Lauren would move out to San Francisco a year later. We married in 1991 and moved to Marin County to start a family. Lauren was EMT trained and CPR certified, and I share several stories of her jumping into action during public emergencies when help was required immediately. She could also inspire grown men and women. Working at PricewaterhouseCoopers, she once convinced 4 top alpha dog male executives to put on colorful Joe Boxer underwear over their gray flannel suit pants before entering the office of founder and CEO Nick Graham to pitch for his account. When they walked in with their pants all on, and Lauren, of course, had hers on as well, he laughed so hard he told him it wasn't necessary for him to pitch because you just won my account. That's the kind of person Lauren was. She could lead, she could do reconnaissance, and she would inspire. Lauren was also athletic, independent, selfless, motivational, and fearless. And Lauren could be everyone's best friend.
Jack, one of the best stories that I think that I've heard you share is a skydiving story. Do you want to share that with our audience this evening?
Sure, it's in there as well. It's the story about Lauren's 30th birthday. And she told me ahead of time that she wanted to do something special, but she wasn't going to tell me what it was until the day of. And I was fine with that. That was her wish. So in the morning of her birthday, I woke up and I looked at her and I said, okay, what are we going to do? And she looked at me and she said, we're going to go jump out of a plane. And I paused for a minute and I said, we are going to jump out of a plane? And she said, well, I am. You can do it if you want. And so we went to go to the place to skydive, and we picked up a friend of ours that was flying in from Alaska that day. And he was a gregarious Alaskan that had, rugged, would do anything, try anything. And he gets in the car and he says, so what are we going to do today? Hike, bike, sail, boat, golf? What are we going to do? And I said, well, we're going to jump out of a plane. And I've never heard him go speechless before. And then he said, I just got off a perfectly normal plane. Why would I want to go back up in a littler one and jump out of it? To which I kind of raised an eyebrow and said, I feel the same way. But once we got to the skydiving place and we saw Lauren put on her sky suit and doing the practice runs that they run you through, we looked at each other and said, we've got to do it too. So by her actions, she inspired two men to do something we never thought we would do. And that skydive was something beautiful to behold. She had it videoed and attached the song One Tree Hill from U2 to the video because it was one of her favorite songs. And of course, she didn't tell anybody because A, she, God forbid anybody tried to talk her out of it, but B, she didn't want anyone worrying about her prior to her birthday jump. And that's just the kind of selfless, caring person she was.
That's a great story, Jack. Thank you so much for sharing. That adds a lot of color to Lauren's personality and who she really was. So why don't you, for our reader or for our listeners this evening, why don't you read your intro to your book? I think the intro really adds some perspective to the day of September 11th and what was going on in your lives.
Sure. It starts out on September 6th, 2001. My college sweetheart, Lauren, flew from our home in Northern California to New Jersey. It was a freighted trip. Lauren's dear grandmother, Vivian, had passed away and she was going back east for the funeral. I wanted to go too, but our old cat, Nicholas, was having health problems. That orange tabby was Lauren's spirit animal. I used to always find them curled up on our bed, Lauren on her tummy, legs in the air like a schoolgirl, reading a book, and Nicholas snoozing in a little ball on the small of Lauren's back. Lauren insisted I stay home in San Rafael to take care of Nicholas. Lauren and I both traveled a fair amount for work, so we were used to saying goodbye. But this parting was one of our most emotional. I was quite fond of little grandma, as Vivian was known, and was sorry I couldn't be there to support my wife. But there was also a joyous feeling because Lauren was carrying a secret. She was 3 months pregnant with our first child. And after little grandma's funeral, she planning to share the good news and to lift her family's spirits. We were getting at the thought of becoming parents, having spent previous decade trying to get pregnant, and there had been plenty of heartbreak along the way, including a miscarriage in 1999 when Lauren was 36. 2 years later, we had pretty much resigned ourselves to raising only cats, and then the miracle happened. On her last night in New Jersey, Lauren called and gave me an enthusiastic recounting of the big reveal of her pregnancy. I always loved talking to her on the phone. She had the cutest little voice, so full of life, and especially so on this night. She and her sisters were about to watch a movie, with Lauren having her favorite snack, a bowl of popcorn mixed with steamed vegetables. I promised I would be there to pick her up at the airport the next day, September 11th. Our house had 2 stories, and we slept upstairs. The nursery was to be just down the hall. Those were the days of intrusive calls from telemarketers, so we'd turn off the ringer on the phone in our bedroom, and I fell asleep. I was awakened early the next morning by distant sound of the answering machine in the kitchen downstairs. I rolled over and snoozed a little bit more. When I opened my eyes, they went right to the clock, 7:03. Then the damnedest thing happened. I looked out the bay window, facing the bed, and saw a spirit. Even now it seems unbelievable, but I know what I saw. The shape of an angel, opaque around the edges as if glimpsed through a drop of water, rising towards the heavens and out of view. I laid in bed for a few moments, overwhelmed. All I could think of in that moment was, whom do I know that recently died? Then it occurred to me that perhaps it was little grandma. Back then I was not a spiritual person, but I felt humbled and grateful having visited by this otherworldly being. I got out of bed, checked on Nicholas, and then turned on the television news, my usual morning routine. Began shaving, but was distracted by the confounding sight on TV of smoke pouring out of both twin towers. The awful images kept coming. Suddenly the Pentagon was on fire, and then reports that a plane was down in Pennsylvania countryside. Like every American, I was sickened by what I was watching, but I wasn't worried about my wife. The TV commentators said that the planes had been grounded nationwide, and my first instinct was that Lauren was stuck in Newark. My initial concern was for my older brother, Jim, a pilot for American Airlines who often flew out of New York and Boston. The phone rang, and I expected it to be Lauren with an update. It was her sister, Vaughn, with whom she had been staying. Is Lauren with you? I asked. No, she said. She left early, and a little current of panic ran through me. She said, I haven't heard from her. I thought she might have contacted you. I answered, no. I thought she would return to your house since her flight was grounded. That's when Vaughn said something that made the hair stand on the back of my neck. Lauren called and told me she was able to get on an earlier flight. At that moment, another call came in. I was praying it was Lauren, but instead I heard the voice of my friend Bob Schultz. I was worried about you, Raxter, he said, invoking an old nickname. I know you travel to New York a lot. I told him about Lauren flying home from Newark and that I was becoming concerned since I had not heard from her. That was when I remembered the answering machine. I bolted downstairs and saw the flashing red light indicating new messages. Lauren was one of those people who always cut it close getting to the airport, but she was so charming in her apologies, you could never be mad at her. That morning, she had been booked on a 9:20 flight from Newark to San Francisco, but somehow arrived at the airport early enough to be asked if she'd like to seat on an earlier flight, scheduled to depart 90 minutes earlier, United 93. First message was Lauren calling me from Newark to inform me of the change to her itinerary, though she didn't mention the flight number. Listening to her sweet voice, I could feel my heart pounding. I shouted out, please be okay, please be okay. On the TV were images of a smoldering hole in the ground in Pennsylvania countryside. At that moment, the commentators were saying they believed that plane had originated out of Chicago. I breathed a huge sigh of relief. But where was Lauren? The next message played. It was her calling from the plane. Lauren's voice was clear and strong, almost businesslike. Honey, are you there? Jack, pick up, sweetie. Okay, well, I just want to tell you I love you. We're having a little problem on the plane. Fine and comfortable, and I'm okay for now. Just love you more than anything. Just know that. It's just a little problem. So honey, I just love you. Please tell my family I love them too. Bye, honey. I fell to the ground and began sobbing. In that moment, I knew Lauren and our baby were gone. The next time I looked at the TV, the crash site in Pennsylvania, Shanksville, Pennsylvania, was being shown, and the announcers were saying that the early reports indicated the downed plane was United 93 out of Newark. There didn't appear to be any survivors. Later, I would find out that Lauren's plane fell to the earth at 10:03 a.m. That's 7:03 in California. The angel that visited me in the sky through the bedroom window wasn't little grandma. It was Lauren.
So Jack, having gone through this, what effect did the loss of Lauren and your unborn child have on you?
After the loss of Lauren and the baby, it was just searing. It was so dark and sad. I was in shock. I paced around the house. I had friends that came over immediately. I would deputize them to answer the phone or the door while I would either lie down or bend over and try not to throw up. I was, as many of us, just dumbfounded by who and why this happened. I lost 35 pounds in 3 months due to depression, which I had no idea what depression was at the time. And I just struggled to get through each and every day. I was almost zombie-like. But I went to a doctor in January of 2002, and he suggested I see a specialist in grief, a psychiatrist that specializes in grief. And it was probably the best thing I ever did at the time, because I remember him teaching me two important things: have pace and have balance. There was also the spirit of Lauren. The prayers from so many that boosted me to live and survive through the darkest of moments. Her message of love, her strength and courage, her subtle between the lines, I love you, meaning I don't let them get you too. So I had to honor her and her love. So I felt like I owed it to her to live on, to be strong, and to walk on. And it was difficult. Each day was hard, but I could hear her voice and her spirit saying, get up, brush your teeth, do the simplest of things, because your life prior to that, our life was like going down a highway, and now I was barefoot on a rocky road by myself. So her incredible spirit would guide me. The heroes of the 40 passengers and crew were the only silver lining to that horrible day. So I tried to meet the sadness head on and honor not just Lauren, but all those people that fought so hard to protect us.
And Jack, despite all of the things that you were doing to try to honor Lauren and the 40 passenger and crew members, that just doesn't seem to be enough. And so what later then were you diagnosed with that really helped you come to grips with your grief and what was going on inside of you?
Yeah. When I felt like I had gotten through the depression, the year of firsts, as I call it, the first year of Christmas without them, the first Father's Day that I would have been a father, the first her birthday where she wasn't there. All that year of first is very painful for anyone that loses someone traumatically or suddenly. And it gets worse before it gets better. It's about 6 months after the tragedy, the shock wears off, and then a thing called longing knocks at your door. And longing says, I'm going to be here for a while. I'm going to make you miss that person so severely that you just won't be able to comprehend it. And that would provide a very challenge to me in terms of moving forward, because there was lots of anxiety bombs and survivor guilt bombs and depression bombs that would come back. And so it took a while for me to realize that, you need to care for it when it happens. And it was, I met a beautiful woman, Sarah Hopkins, in 2006. And we probably started dating about 8 months later, and she had lost her mother and was seeking counsel for that. And we dated for quite a while. And in 2012, I was just having some severe setbacks. I couldn't understand what was holding me back, why I was not moving forward in a better, healthier direction. And Sarah suggested that maybe I go back and see a therapist again. And so I did, and I went to the guy, and he recommended that I see someone of a specialist that's outside of his realm. And I said, what do they specialize in? And he said, PTSD. I said, well, isn't PTSD something it's a war infliction, something that happens on a battleground? And he said, yes. And that, but it's also something that can happen to someone whose loss is so sudden, so horrific, and so quickly. So I went to see this therapist who specialized in PTSD, and she diagnosed me as having severe PTSD and wanted to use a technique known as EMDR to try to figure out what was happening, what was holding me back. And what she learned through that process and through that technique was that I was still haunted by the loss of the child. And that was an entity that I didn't know. I knew Lauren, but I didn't know the child. And so I couldn't kind of let go of thinking about, what that child would be like each year, what grade they would go into, what sport they might be picking up that year. It was really difficult. And what she was able to do was find that through EMDR, find that, she asked me, she says, have you mourned the loss of your child? Did you do anything to memorialize that unborn entity? And I said, no. And that's when she said, what'd you do with Lauren's ashes? And I said, I still have them. I don't know where to throw them, where to release the ashes, what to do. So there's something holding me back there. And she pointed out that the baby's DNA was in those ashes. Why don't I go out and do a ceremonial distribution in a special place to honor them both? And so that's exactly what I did. I included the ashes of our cat Nicholas in there, and it was really very helpful for me to do that. She also suggested that I write a letter or a diary to the child, to the unborn child. And that's why the book starts before the introduction with a little note that I wrote. Dear son or daughter, I'm writing this book at the advice of my therapist. She felt it would be helpful to share a little bit about your mom and dad and why you will always have your place in history. The story may also help others who have suffered traumatic loss. So that suggestion of hers, that technique of hers, was something I shared with a friend of mine who was a writer, author of 7 books, and his name's Alan Shipnuck. And Alan said, anytime you want to do that, I'll be your therapist. We don't care if it ever becomes a book. If it does, fine. But he says, I'll help you write that. And so he did. And that's really the backbone behind the book. However, it would take that was in 2016. It would take roughly 6 years before I would decide that it was time to publish it. And that was when I suffered a near fatal accident that caused fourth degree burns over 80% of my back. And while I was in the burn unit ICU for 33 days, I was watching, stories every day of people dying of COVID and not being able to say goodbye to their loved ones. And it dawned on me that I nearly did the same thing to Sarah that happened to me with Lauren by dying suddenly and not being able to say goodbye, and that perhaps it was going to help some people. And so that's really the reason I agreed to publish the book. It's not one I wanted or intended to do, but as Alan refers to the book, it's a love story times 2. Because the battle has allowed me to come through the toughest of times, find love again, be happy again, I used to be a morning person when Lauren was alive, so annoyingly so that she'd tell me to go away, and she'd put the pillow over her head, and now I'm back to being that annoying person that brings Sarah her tea in the morning, and she says, go away, leave me alone, let me sleep some more. So I must be back.
That's awesome. So Jack, what do you really believe that the book and writing this book as a tribute to both Lauren and your unborn child has helped in your healing?
Well, it's allowed me to finally close another chapter, as I used to say in many interviews, because it was such a public thing. Every year the calls would come in from the media, and they're just trying to do an honorable thing and do an honorable story. And of course, I would never not talk about Lauren and Flight 93 and the heroes there. So it is a first-hand historical account of what I went through. It does honor Lauren and the other passengers and crew from the flight for the heroics of what they've done. Just because that flight did not hit another symbol of our democracy, be it the Capitol or the White House, doesn't mean it didn't have its important significance. And that is that they won the battle against the terrorists. They decided to fight back over a rural area where no one would be injured on the ground. And so I really was inspired by that story and wanted to keep it alive. And thank you all for doing so, because it really is the silver lining to a very gray day in that horrible, horrible time. But then what I also learned was that my story might help others who have recently gone through tragedies. And my heart goes out to all the people in in Israel and the Mideast that are being affected by that now, and the years of trauma that they're going to go through. And the final thing is I wanted to destigmatize mental health therapy. In fact, I don't refer to PTSD as PTSD anymore, because it's not a disorder. I refer to it as PTSI because it's an injury. You're not born with mental trauma. But just like breaking your arm or, fracturing a leg, you go to the doctor and you get it fixed. Mental trauma deserves and should be taken seriously and addressed. And there are many great professionals out there in their fields that can help people through it, as they did me.
Absolutely. And Jack, over these last 22 years, can you share with us some of the lessons that you've learned that can help inspire hope in others who may be dealing with tragedy and loss?
Yeah, I mean, I've learned to keep the door open. Like I said, I wasn't a spiritual person before September 11th, 2001, but so many things have happened to me that I feel Lauren is there. And I say keep the door open, because opening the door lets you let bad things out and good things in, whether it's new friends, whether it's new experiences, whether it's the moments of that I write about in the book where things are more than irony or more than coincidence that happen in life that kind of help move you forward and give you hope and inspire you that, yeah, there is bigger meaning to all this. And also the mental health therapy, it does help. It helps you, it gives you a toolbox to address the moments when you get triggered by an event or something on television or anything. It allows you to be able to fight the demons, fight the darkness away, and it is something that I highly recommend that people not shy away from as being some sort of stigma. It's much more important than that.
Yeah, and that's so important, Jack. And thank you for sharing those inspirational words. One of the things that you've shared with me is a story about you two. And I think that those who were in our audience this evening would really enjoy hearing that story from you.
It was one of the more cathartic moments for me and it was another chapter of closure, if you will. Lauren and I, our first date was a U2 concert. There's a funny story about how that came about, which I cover in the book at length. But that was her favorite band, and we love the band. We love their music. It's very meaningful and spiritual. And in 2002, I met and became friends with actor Sean Penn. He and his wife Robin and their kids lived one town over, and we met by chance at a friend's house, and became friends. And so I had talked about Lauren a lot with Sean. He was very, very kind and sincere person, something a lot of people don't realize, his personal personality. But so I showed him the ticket stub one day of that I kept in my wallet of our first date, 1985 U2 concert. And he took more interest in Lauren and was over at the house one day and wanted to see the video of her skydive. And he asked why Lauren had chosen One Tree Hill as the song for her skydive. And I said it was her favorite song. She loved the meaning behind it, which is, a story. The song was written by the band for a friend that had died and that they lost. They never played it in concert. It was very personal to them, but it's a beautiful song, and it's about life being like a river till you hit the sea of afterlife. So, unbeknownst to me, in 2005, Sean said, let's go to the U2 concert. It was in November of 2005 at the Oakland Coliseum. He'd talked to Bono. He's good friends. So he got us in the green room prior to meet the band. And there were a lot of other luminaries in Sean's group that were attending with us. And people like Robin Williams and whatnot. So we were in the special seating area to view the concert, and I was sitting on the railing with Sean, next to Sean, and the concert was great, and they had just finished singing One Love, and the lights went down and the cheering went off, and everybody's waiting for an encore, and Bono walks to the front of the stage with a single spotlight and acoustic guitar. And he raises his hand and he bows his head. And he said, "This song is for beautiful Lauren." And I looked at Sean and I just said, "Did he say what I think he said?" And Sean gave me that wiry look, and I instantly knew what he had been up to. And so there's more about this experience in the book, but they went on to sing the lyrics in a cappella. Bono did, like a river to the sea, only changing the vernacular from he runs like a river to she runs like a river. So I was shocked and I was overwhelmed. And after he finished, I had my head buried in my hands, sobbing, and I felt two arms come around me, and it look up, and one side of Robin Williams, the other side is Lance Armstrong. Sean had told everybody in the group that not to let me leave because he didn't know when they were going to do the tribute. And he said, if Jack needs a beer, you give him a beer, give him yours. He says, if he needs to go to the bathroom, let him piss in your beer. Just don't let him leave. And so afterwards, we then went to the Four Seasons in San Francisco for the after party. And Sean gave a beautiful toast to the greatest band on the planet, as he called them. It was a magical night. It was just, everybody was teeming and happy, and it was, star-studded, of course. And Sean brought Bono over to me, and we kind of stood around off in the corner talking, and Bono took his glasses off, and we shared a lot of, stories. And he we talked about their music. We talked about the lyrics and the meaning behind the lyrics. And, he said, you understand that? And I said, yeah, I do. I said, but, I just, I'm not a religious person, and I just don't know how to handle all this. And he said, you'll see her again. And I said, yeah, I'd like to believe that. And he put his arm around me. He said, "No, I'm sure you'll see her again." And I said, "Okay, if you say so. I just hope that, God willing, I will be able to." And he shared some of God's greatest virtues with me, and so I said, "Well, thank you for doing that." At that time, Sean came over and asked, if I'd shown Bono the ticket stub, and I said no. I was kind of shy and wasn't really, wanting to pull it out and say, "Look at this." And Bono asked. He said, "No, I'd like to see it." And he looked at it and he said, the first thing out of his mouth was, "1985. We were a baby band." And then he looked at the price of the ticket and he says, $12.50. He says, "We weren't worth much, were we?" And we kind of laughed. And then he said to me, "May I sign it?" And which time a friend who was eavesdropping whipped a pen over my shoulder and gave Bono. And he sat down and he wrote, "Like a river to the sea, Lauren," on the front of the ticket. And on the back, you turn it over and he wrote, "See you for a swim, Bono."
Very nice. So as we're going to start looking through the chat to see what questions you may have for Jack, I'm going to have Courtney play an excerpt from "Like a River to the Sea" that was recorded when Bono sang it on this particular day.
This is for the beautiful Lauren. Turn away to face the cold, enduring chill as the day begs the night. Mercy, Lord, the sun so bright it leaves no shadow, only scar carved into the stone on the face of earth. The moon is up and over one tree, yeah. You see the sun go down in your eyes. She run like a river.
Okay, so beautiful, beautiful. Okay, so the book "Like a River to the Sea" is available on Amazon. It's also available in our Eastern National Bookstore here at Flight 93 National Memorial. I've read the book. I highly recommend it. It's a very inspiring story. And as it says, of heartbreak and hope in the wake of United 93. So we're waiting for some questions in our chat from participants. Jack, anything else you want to share with the audience?
No, I appreciate everybody coming tonight, and certainly appreciate your patience and our technical difficulties. I also appreciate any and everyone who supports the Friends of Flight 93 education program. There was an instance last year in 2022 where one of the networks was actually showing a tribute to everyone on 9/11, but they forgot to mention Flight 93, which I was amazed. But I hope that people won't forget, and I hope people will continue to keep the memory of Flight 93 heroes alive.
Thanks, Jack. Well, Jack, this isn't a question, but we do have a comment from one of our attendees, and she says, "I want to tell Jack I am so proud of him and his wife and all of the passengers of Flight 93. They all are heroes. I am so proud of all of them."
That's beautifully said.
So anyone else out there have questions? Let me see. Hey, any questions? You can type them in the chat. Oh, here, okay. Grant. Hello, Jack. This is Grant. Very seldom do men who have lost their wives come forward in this particular way. Do you have any thoughts on this newfound genre?
my thoughts are, if there's anything that you can do to help others, then, maybe that's the most masculine thing you can do. Again, it wasn't a book that I intended to write. My wife and I are pretty private people, but I felt an obligation not only to honor Lauren and the others, but also to, say my piece to help anyone who's been through this, to inspire them to seek mental counseling. It'll help. Maybe that's the reason I was put here on this planet, is to do that. I don't know, but I appreciate Grant's nice words. Grant's a longtime supporter of the Flight 93 families and has written his own book, I understand. And so we appreciate him a lot too.
So we have a question from Lorraine. Well, it's actually somewhat of a comment. It has been an honor to listen to you, Jack. You are a great speaker, and I will always keep Lauren and all of those heroes of Flight 93 alive in my heart. I am looking forward to reading your book. I hope your back is all healed. That was an amazing story about you too. God bless you.
That's beautifully said, and God bless her as well. Thank you.
So we have an anonymous attendee who writes, do you feel better, and how your life is going now?
It's, as I said, there's the whole process, and it is a process. It never goes away. There's always the scar and the sorrow and the loss. And, I've managed to get through it. You hear the stories of the greatest day of a man's life is when their child is born. I miss that, but that's the cross I have to bear, and I'll bear that. I don't, I'll take that. I've always said that if you want to make God laugh, just tell him you got plans. It's a much better life now. Sarah is my guardian angel on earth, and Lauren is my guardian angel in heaven. I often joke with Sarah that and we kid each other with, but we're serious in that her mother and Lauren probably had tea up in heaven and decided to put us kids together so that we could live happily the rest of our days. We do live happily now. We have 2 cats. And no plans for children, so we're enjoying our life now, and it's been most rewarding from the standpoint that all the people out there that have cared so much for all the people that were lost on September 11th, and those prayers are powerful because they've had a healing effect on me and got me to a new place of feeling stronger and happier, and I think that's the most important thing I could say about where I am now.
So another comment from Michelle. I agree, Flight 93 needs to be remembered. My uncle saw the plane turning in the air over Cleveland area. I signed up as a Friends of Flight 93, not knowing anyone personally or having a connection, but simply read an article that it was the last of the memorials to get funding. That upset me, as I felt these were heroes who should be remembered and the stories shared.
Yeah, that's beautifully said as well. When people dive into the story of what happened and how quickly they bounded together as just normal citizens, they were, and the manifest of heroes, it was manifest. I mean, they were young, they were old, they were male, they were female. They were gay, they were straight, they were black, they were white, they were, their fathers, mothers, daughters, husbands, mothers to be, and they did the most selfless thing. They gained reconnaissance. They voted. They came together and voted. I could see Lauren's involvement as being there, tapping her wrist and on tapping her watch on the wrist, saying, "Whatever we do, we better act fast." I can just say that field in Pennsylvania wasn't the terrorist target, and so the victory was really theirs, and they share that with every one of us.
So we have a Jim Shepherd who says, when will you next buy me dinner at MPCC Chef?
Whenever you want, Shep, come on down. The door is open.
Okay. Do you find that you are surrounded by people who are supportive of your process in the grieving and healing and not pushing you to move on from something that happened years ago?
Yeah, it's interesting. There are some people that expect you to just, pick up the pieces and move on. But anyone who's lost someone close just realize that there's no way to do that. And grief comes in many different forms and is handled many different ways by people. It's there. You just have to learn. And I learned that if there's anyone that is obtuse about the healing process, then there's someone that's not going to be a part of your healing. But the people who are caring and that do support you are a big part of that healing. The friends like Sean, doing things that he did for Lauren as a tribute. The friends of Lauren's who continuously keep her in their heart and their prayers, and they lay flowers at a monument in San Rafael, California. To all the strangers have reached out that have accepted Lauren as one of theirs, and to the young, the most inspirational ones are the youngsters that come out and want to know more about Lauren, and they a little girl reached out and said she was asked to do a report on who her hero was, and she said she was choosing Lauren. A little boy named Tucker wrote me a letter this year, and it's a brief little letter because Tucker's only 8 years old, but he took the time to print out a letter to me. And he said, "Dear Mr. Grandcolas, my name is Tucker, and I'm 8 years old. With the anniversary of September 11th coming up, I wanted to send you a letter and let you know that I am taking time to remember Miss Lauren and honor her memory. In homeschool, we do a lot of history and learn about people like Miss Lauren so that I can grow up to walk in their footsteps. I hope that this letter brings peace and happiness to your day. Thank you for responding to my letter in 2021. It means so much to me. Sincerely, Tucker."
So precious. So
And
Jack,
I did respond to it.
oh yeah. So we have a Tiffany who says, I live an hour's drive from the crash site and I have a 1-year-old. I was 12 years old when the events happened, but I'm not sure what to tell her, my daughter, when she gets older and starts asking questions. Any advice?
Oh, that's really touching. Yeah, I think each parent has their own way of parenting and sharing, tragedy. But I think that if she can share it with the color that these were wonderful human beings, they're terribly missed. In fact, I talked to a high school one time, and they were all about the same age as our child would have been. And I said, in a way, your generation was robbed of many potential friends that you might have had. And if you think about all the people that were lost that day, there were probably a lot more children that would have been born had they not lost their lives. They'd be here today, and they'd be friends, maybe even husbands and wives to many that they never got to know, which is a shame. But most importantly, it is that love will conquer hate. Hate is what caused this, and it's an ideology that we must overcome. Otherwise, hate will conquer us. And I believe love can conquer hate. I really do. And I think if everyone takes a moment and does something that's loving to someone or even a stranger, out of memory or honor to anyone that was lost on September 11th, they'll feel a real buoy in their heart, and their spirit will rise. And quite frankly, I wish that we had the unity as a country that we had after 9/11. today, because this country unfortunately seems very fractured from where we were in 2002 and beyond.
I've heard that said many times, Jack. So we have Gordy Felt, who has said, well done, Jack. How can we continue to keep the story of Flight 93 relevant with those that are too young to remember September 11th?
Well, thank you, Gordy. I, think that you guys are doing that, Donna. I mean, you're the best charged to do it. And you guys have been coming through with your educational series. I know that there's a lot more in the works, and that you're reaching out to more and more classrooms with study guides for teaching the history of this flight and the passengers and crew. I think that us as individuals, myself, we're not going to be here forever. So hopefully my book will tell Lauren's story and share that. I think that it's just incumbent upon all of us to kind of, even the people that are listening now, to reach out to friends and people and share with them what happened and why it's significant and important. Grant, who spoke earlier, who asked a question earlier, when he first started calling me, he was in, I believe, grade school, early high school. And the reason he wanted to find out more about Flight 93 was because the kids in his class said it was the flight that didn't do anything. But on contrary, it did probably more than anything. It spoke volumes to the courage and the unity that our citizens have for one another. And it's really an uplifting story if you look at it in the right way. That is the silver lining to the gray cloud. And I think people can find inspiration. They can draw inspiration. They can say, would I have been able to do that? And I contend that most people would. These individuals were very, very courageous in the face of their imminent demise. And yet they were selfless enough to launch their counterattack when it was over a rural area in Pennsylvania, which they could see the ground and they knew it wasn't going to cause more destruction. That in itself is such a lesson, such an amazing story. And, just because it didn't hit another monument of the United States doesn't mean it wasn't important.
So David Kaplan remarks, as Mike Sullivan from The Walk with Joe pointed out, they picked the wrong plane to mess with.
Well, that's certainly, I mean, there were a lot of tough guys and some tough ladies and some very strong spirits that had got on their side as they rode in to fight back, and they turned the table on those terrorists, didn't they?
Yes.
They terrorized terrorists. It's that we know, and there's no greater love than to sacrifice your life for your fellow man, and I think that again, he's right. You messed with the wrong group.
So Judy, who is one of the ambassadors here at Flight 93, wants you to know that many visitors noticed the wording on Lauren's panel at the ball. Then she wants you to know that your child is being remembered.
Which I greatly appreciate. Again, you all do such magnificent work there. The memorial, if anyone hasn't been to it, is extraordinary. A great place to visit and really reflect and get perspective in life. There's a story early on that really touched me when there wasn't a memorial there. It was just a field with some makeshift memorial items on it in the parking lot. And there were ambassadors like Judy that would take care, and they would come out and talk to people and tell the story and give them more information. But that was really the early days. And the one story that really touched me was a couple from Michigan who had driven down to the site, and it was Thanksgiving Day, and it was a snowy day, and the ambassador went out there to check on the site and saw the car and saw the Michigan license plates, and he tapped on the window and said, "Is everything okay?" And they said, yeah, we're just here to pay our respects. Well, that ambassador went back home, had his Thanksgiving dinner, and spent a few hours with his family before he was going to go back at sunset and close off the memorial site. And the car was still there. And he tapped on the window and he said, is everything okay? And they said, yes, we just couldn't think of a better place to spend a day to be thankful.
Very powerful. So we have a Dakota who wants to know, she says, I don't mean for this to bring up bad memories, but how often do you listen to Lauren's voicemail she left you that day? And does it get easier the more you listen to it?
No, it never gets easier. And you know, there's select times when I listen to it. It's not often because it's already ingrained and burned into my mind. You know, it's the moments before my wife and unborn child perished. But what does inspire me is the strength and courage that she had to be so caring as to not let me know that she had no fear, and she didn't want me to think that she was afraid or worried or frightened. In fact, she even mentions it's a little problem, as if we're going to take care of it. I mean, I read through the code, if you will, that she said. She said, I love you, meaning don't let them get you too. Take care of yourself. But she also says there's a little problem, and little problem means they're going to take care of it, and that she wasn't afraid. And I think if anybody can draw the same inspiration for their lives and embrace their lives, I mean, that would be the greatest honor you could show Lauren. Her one phrase that she had attached to the refrigerator was a line from Shawshank Redemption, the movie Shawshank Redemption. And it was, get busy living or get busy dying.
Okay, I don't see any more questions in the chat box. So, Jack, again, thank you so much for joining us this evening. Apologies with the technical difficulties there. But, you know, we recovered very well, got on with the show, and the show must go on. And you did a great job, Jack. We appreciate you taking the time to speak with us and our friends and the participants from this evening.
Well, thank you, Donna. It's been an honor to talk to you and Courtney and all the people that are on. I'm really sorry for the delay. The technical difficulties, I believe, occurred on my end, so it was not anything that you guys did. Yeah, it's been very nice, and it's always a pleasure to talk about Lauren and the heroes of Flight 93.
Okay, and so this session will be recorded and will be available on the Friends YouTube channel and on our website. So again, we thank you for joining us for our first session of Connections. And we are in the process of planning our November session, which will be the last one for 2023. We're looking to have a special, some special guests for Veterans Day, to honor and remember some of our post 9/11 veterans. So look for that information here in the next week or so. So thank you everyone for your patience this evening. We truly appreciate you, each of you, for taking the time to join us this evening. Thanks, Jack, and everyone have a safe evening, and we'll be talking to you soon.
Thanks again.
Bye-bye.
Bye now.